tonight we have a really great speaker and interesting topic for you. So our Commodore, Russell Croce, is going to introduce us.
Thank you, Marge. We are pleased to have the Sausalito Historical Society join us for a history talk as part of the Sausalito Yacht Club's 2025 speaker series. Tonight's topic is on the history of Sausalito yacht clubs. This topic is relevant to the rich history of the SYC and the city of Sausalito. And we thank Staff Commodore Marge Guttari for making this happen.
Hey. Here's the VIP table.
The rich maritime heritage of yacht clubs in Sausalito stretches back more than 70 years before our yacht club was established in 1942. The SYC is one of 7 yacht clubs that calls Sausalito home. This is part of Sausalito's maritime past and nautical history. I'd like to introduce our speaker tonight, Rip Hunter. Hold on, come on. Hey, buddy. So Rip originally grew up in Marin, a Redwood High School graduate who sailed Cal 20s around the bay in the 70s and 80s. But then he lost his way for 40 years by working and living in the East Bay. In 2020, he found his way back home and is now a resident of our great town. All right. Rip fell in love with Sausalito and quickly got involved in the community. He is a board member of the Sausalito Historical Society. But he also is the current president of the Sausalito Foundation, and when he's not studying up on the rich history of Sausalito, he plays on Sausalito's 2-time champion bocce team. I don't like that. I'm a member, a 1-time champion, the Big Lebachis. I'll put a plug in for that. Okay. Please give a warm welcome to our speaker, Rip Hunter.
Thank you, Russell. And remember, there's always next year. Thank you very much for having me here tonight. I am so excited to be able to bring up this subject, which was, I got to give Marge credit. She reached out to the Historical Society in October, and she said, we would like to have you all come and speak. And she said, how about talk about the yacht clubs? And she mentioned the Sausalito Yacht Club, which has a rich history, of course. But then we discussed it a little further and thought, why not take it all the way back 150 years to all the yacht clubs that were here that called Sausalito either home or were birthed here in those 150 years. So got very excited about that. So thank you very much, Marge, for having us be here about that. I suspect most people have a little bit of history about this yacht club. I've been asking some members, and there's some history here that you all know. So if we hit on some things you know, great. If we hit on some things you didn't know, then even better. But I suspect most people here don't know the history of all 7 yacht clubs. We have 3 current ones. This one, of course. To our north is the Sausalito Cruising Club, and then to the south is the Presidio Yacht Club. But there are 4 others that have been here in the past. Before I get to that, if you'll indulge me, I just have to give a quick, a little PR announcement about the Historical Society. And so for those of you that support the Historical Society, thank you very much. I know our president Stanford's here, we have Alice here, Nick is here. We have a group of people, very passionate, dedicated people that help support the mission of the Sausalito Historical Society. This is our 50th year. In 1975, the Historical Society was founded by Jack Tracy and a group of passionate citizens that wanted to document, preserve, protect, and share the history of Sausalito, and that's kind of what we're doing here tonight. So thank you for your support, and if you are interested, our website is there. I would love to have you think about joining us as a member. So we're going to talk about the history of yacht clubs, but I do have one caveat, okay? And that is that history, like any history, is based on what we have heard from people before us. So we have done our very best to research this through the archives of the Historical Society, through the internet, through interviews, whatever we could, but we are likely not going to get it perfectly. So if there's something that we said incorrectly, or if we missed something, please accept our apologies in advance. And I do encourage you to raise your hand and correct me, or raise your hand and ask a question if you'd like some clarification. We have a lot to cover. We're going to do this in under an hour, I hope. So we will get started here. We're going to start with the end in mind. So this map here, which shows the 7 yacht clubs and where they were based originally, and then where the year they were founded. So right down here, number 1 is the San Francisco Yacht Club. That's the grandfather. That's the first one here, and in 1869. And then you can see number 1 moved up here to Sausalito, and then number 1 moved over here to Belvedere. So the San Francisco Yacht Club will be the first one we'll go over. Number 2 is the Pacific Yacht Club, which was based in Old Town. Number 3 is the Corinthian Yacht Club in Tiburon. Number 4 is the St. Francis Yacht Club, now in San Francisco. And then, of course, our favorite club, Sausalito Yacht Club, and then the Cruising Club, and then the Presidio Yacht Club. So let's go back in time. But before we go back in time to just 1869, we felt it was important to illuminate some of the history of why the San Francisco Bay, what are the elements that made this a great place for a yacht club, for yachting, and for a yacht club. So we'll go back, way back in time, really quick, to talk about the bay. So the bay was, according to scientists, the bay was formed about 600,000 years ago, and right here is the Hayward Fault, and then over here is the San Andreas Fault. And about that time, there were some tectonic plate shifts which caused the ground to what they call downwarping. Downwarping created a crater, and that crater was the foundation of what would soon be the San Francisco Bay. Over time, the bay began to fill up. I'm talking lots of time, hundreds of thousands of years of time. Snow melt, glacier melt up in the Sierra Nevadas, come down through the rivers to what would soon be San Pablo Bay and into the San Francisco Bay. And at the same time, really more important, because it's still today is a problem, and that is the seawater rises. Salt water rising in the Pacific, a couple inches a year, slowly rose up until it really filled up through the Golden Gate and filled up this entire bay. And just to give you a perspective, this is the Farallon Islands. So hundreds of thousands of years ago, this was the coastal mountain range of the West Coast. So that much water has risen and filled into the bay. So now we have this beautiful bay that's sitting there just waiting for someone to find it and someone to start using it. And guess who that was? 3,500 years ago, the Miwoks and the Ohlone tribes came through here. Scientists say they came across land bridges from the Asia or up through South America, but at sometime around 3,500 years ago, they landed here in the Bay Area. So the Ohlone group is here on the East Bay, San Francisco, and down to, say, Salinas. And then the North Bay, starting right here at the Golden Gate, and then up to, let's say, Bodega Bay. Those were the Miwok groups. And specifically, we're interested in the coastal Miwoks that were right here along the shore. And as you likely know, they were right here. So Old Town, New Town, all the way to around the bay. The coastal Miwoks enjoyed a very beautiful life here. They were hunter-gatherers, so you could find shelter here. You could find the 3 W's: wood, water, wildlife. all the things you would need to have a really successful and beautiful life, and they lived here very peacefully for thousands of years. I mentioned they were hunters, so they also were fishermen, so they were very proficient fishermen. And this was a bountiful bay full of a variety of fish. So to achieve that, they would build boats. And they would make these boats out of Thule reed boats. Anywhere from 2 to 8 people could be in the boat. They could take it out quickly, safely, fish, bring back their resources, and be quite successful. So we get to say that the Miwoks were probably the first mariners on the bay. Now I do take a little bit of imagination here, so let's just say that the headman, who's the leader there, probably said, hey, I need my 3 strongest men to get in our 3 fastest boats, and let's take them across to that island over there and bring them back, and the first one back will receive a reward, and we'll celebrate you every year, and we'll redo it every year. Sound familiar? Okay, it's a stretch, I know, but archaeologists say that there is no evidence that they were competitive in their boats, but we try to say, why not? So they lived here quite peacefully until 1775. So moving right along on the history line, that was when the first Europeans found their way through the Golden Gate. At least that's what evidence says. Perhaps somebody came through earlier, but the first documented arrival of a European here in the San Francisco Bay Area was on August 5th, 1775. And that boat was the San Carlos. It was a Spanish supply ship charged with finding the entrance to the bay, because there had already been a land expedition that saw the bay, but nobody had figured out how to get into it. And so when they arrived, their first day, according to their logbook, was they anchored right off of Old Town because of the shelter. So they anchored there for a day or so, surveyed the bay, and then they picked Angel Island in the cove, the northern cove, which is today called Ayala Cove, and they stayed there for 6 weeks. And they enjoyed the 3 W's. They got wood to fix their boats, they got water for their casks, and they got wildlife for their stores, so that they could stay here, finish surveying the bay, and then head back to Spain. You can see this great picture, well, maybe not look so great there, but a rendition of the San Carlos coming through the Golden Gate right here in 1775. And this was actually the map that was hand-drawn by one of their navigators, something similar to this. So when they got back to Spain, they said, this is a beautiful place. This is a beautiful bay. We need to colonize it, and we need to protect it. And that is, that next year, the Spanish marched in, they built the Presidio, and then they started building the Mission Dolores now with the intention to colonize and then to protect the bay. I know this slide is sort of Bay Area milestones because the bay was significant. When you think about the people that came to California, at least to Northern California, more than half of them came by water. They came up through the Cape or whatever, and they landed here and disembarked. And the Spanish knew that was going to happen, so they wanted to try to keep people out. But you couldn't keep people out because you don't have the weapons or the manpower to do it. So ships came in, and this was one of my favorite down here. This is the HMS Raccoon, which is a British ship, one of many ships that had come into the bay. This came in, French ship came in 1795, and Argentinian ship came in, Russian ship came in. This one came down from up in the Columbia River. There was an expedition that occurred there, and it also landed at Ayala Cove and stayed until the Spanish pushed them out, but that's why we have it called Raccoon Straits, which is a great, because when I was sailing here, I kept looking for raccoons. Like, wow, that's a long swim.
Was it scuttled in Raccoon Straits?
No, it sailed back to England after that. That's a great question, though, because there are probably more wrecks in the San Francisco Bay. I looked at that stat and I didn't write it down, but hundreds and hundreds of ships, not the ones that they made landfill out of, but the ones that crashed. Line Point, I mean, even the San Carlos, when it left, it hit Line Point out there on Fort Baker, damaged its rudder. It had to spend 10 more days in Horseshoe Cove over there to repair itself. So that's a dangerous area. There's quite a bit of that. That's a whole different speaking series. In 1821, the Spanish did their best to protect this, but then you can see in 1821, Spain cedes Alta California, Northern California, to the Mexican government, and this becomes Mexican territory. You can see the Spanish flag and the Mexican flag, because California flew under a number of different flags. And right now it's Mexico. Mexico tries to keep out ships, but you can't keep out ships. So the whaling business was so proficient in those days, from the 1820s to about the 1840s, 1850s. And this was a perfect place. Once you went and got whales, this was a perfect place to come and resupply. Wood, water, wildlife. So lots and lots of whaling ships came in, and they anchored mostly in Old Town. Old Town had a deep harbor there. You had quick access. You could run your boat aground. You could get off. You could repair it. It certainly made things very convenient on your way back to Russia, Britain, wherever you were going. Significant, though, was in 1822, a British whaler called Orion came through the gate, stopped in Old Town, refitted, went over to San Francisco because the captain wanted his first mate who spoke Spanish to negotiate a little bit with the commandant of the Presidio, and that person was William Richardson, who our bay is named after, and who was credited as being the founder of both San Francisco and Sausalito. He was the first person to have a house and be a citizen of Yerba Buena before it was San Francisco, and then he was the first resident here of Sausalito. I think that's amazing. That's probably the most little underappreciated fact, that here's a guy who's credited with sort of being the European founder of both of those towns. So he gets off the boat and he never gets back on. And that's a different story. He marries the commandant's daughter. He becomes the port captain, and finally in 1838 he works with the Mexican government to secure a land grant, which is called Sausalito, Rancho del Sausalito. And that's not a great rendition of it, but you can kind of see where it starts right here at the Golden Gate, and then it kind of goes right up the coast, up to Mount Tamalpais, and 19,571 acres. They gave him that, of this prime land. And he moves his family over to Old Town, builds a house, and becomes a businessman supplying ships with wood, water, and wildlife. And he becomes very successful, becomes very rich at it, because on your way, there's somebody who's doing that for you, and he took care of that. But clouds were coming for William Richardson. In 1846, there was a bear flag revolt here. That's this flag right here, which soon became a California flag. And then the Mexican army lost in Mexico to the American army, and so California came under American U.S. control. And the U.S. Navy sends ships here to protect its harbor and to start colonizing its area. And the Navy decides to go to Old Town for its Pacific Fleet Naval Yard. So they build a sawmill, they build a dry dock, they build some homes, some houses, some hotels, and that becomes the West Coast Naval Area until 1852, when they decide there's not enough room and they move it to Mare Island. So Mare Island, this was where it was before. Thank goodness the Navy didn't choose Old Town as their long-term headquarters. The next year, what happened in 1849? The gold rush is in full force, and hundreds of thousands of people are now making their way to California. I put down the population. In 1845, it was 100 in San Francisco. These are just San Francisco. So the rest of the bay was probably less. And then in 1849, San Francisco logs in at 5,000 registered people living there. And then the next year, when California becomes a 31st state, there's 25,000 people here in San Francisco. So lots and lots of people are coming to San Francisco, and they're all trying to become wealthy. That's why they're all coming here. It's mostly men. They're coming wagon train. They're coming through the Golden Gate on the boats, and they're all trying to seek their fortunes. Lots of them didn't make it, but some did. And that is the beginning of yachting here in the Bay Area. And here's the deal. These guys, these merchants, these bankers, these speculators, these gamblers, whoever they are who are making a lot of money, they got to do something with their money. And so they buy big houses, they throw lavish parties, they do everything they want. Now they say, I'm going to get me a boat. Because owning a boat is a very profitable thing, right? But they didn't, so when they bought their boats, it was because they wanted to show how much money they had. So they built these really long, big, long boats. They outfitted them inside. They spent tens of thousands of dollars, which was a lot of money in those days, to make these beautiful social boats that they could do. And so here's John, who says, my boat's bigger than your boat. And here's Steve saying, no, yeah, but my boat's nicer than your boat. And then here's John saying, but my boat's faster than your boat. He says, prove it. And so right around 1851, 1852, there are a number of people that are racing their boats around the bay. Crazy racing. There's no rules. There's no starboard tack rule or whatever. Everybody's just doing whatever they want. And that caused some concern amongst these boat owners, because boats were getting crashed into, boats were sinking, boats were having problems. In my research, though, I spent a lot of time looking at all this stuff. I learned a lot, because there was stuff I didn't know about. For example, in 1852, there was a yacht club that was started. It's called the Pioneer Yacht Club. There was a news article that said a couple of wealthy guys, a group of wealthy guys, started the Pioneer Yacht Club a good 17 years before the San Francisco Yacht Club was formed. But this yacht club lasted a couple of months, totally underfunded, under-enthusiastic, and it falls right apart. But it doesn't stop people from wanting to race in the bay. And so in the research I found, in 1855, right here is the course. A race course was put together by some wealthy people who wanted to bet. So you raced your boats, and everybody else betted on the boats. Why not? If you can't beat them, then join them through making some money. And there were two boats. This is a great story that I'm not going to go deep into. I'm just going to touch on it a little bit. But it was in a newspaper article that these two boats started over here in Vallejo Wharf, went up to Hunters Point, went over here to Goat Island, down to Fort Point and back. And so that was the course. And thousands of people were on the bar and on the bay watching this thing start. So these two boats, one called the Cape Dodge, a schooner, and another one called the Olivia, take off racing. And it's clear that the Olivia is a faster boat. So that boat is going fast. The Dodge is sort of slowing down. They make the first turn, and then out of nowhere, another boat jumps into the race called the Alexandria. It jumps in, it races up, it catches up with the Olivia, it loops the Olivia, then it's Olivia, and then it stops, and then the Olivia and the Cape Dodge start going, and then it picks up, goes around Hunter Point and wins the race. Wasn't registered to run, nobody knew who it was. The other two boats actually stopped racing because it was so fast. So whoever put up the $1,000 never paid it because he didn't know who this boat was. So everybody was pretty much up in arms with what the deal here was. And that happened time and time again. 55, 56, 58, it just kept happening. But slowly you could see that these boat owners were like, all right, if we're going to do this race, we're going to have somebody stand there and actually make sure they make the turn. And we're going to be able to give you signals to say, you know, what's happening. And so rules started coming together slowly. That kept going and going until there were enough rules and enough interested people that a group of guys said, let's form a yacht club here in San Francisco so we can have a standard set of rules. We could have races that are run correctly. We could have social events before and after, and so it made a lot of sense to them. And that takes us to yacht clubs. Yeah.
When was the first yacht club in the whole world?
So I just wrote this while you were asking. I anticipated your question. The oldest yacht club, so that's what we wanted to take 1 minute out and talk about the formation of yacht clubs, because the Pioneer Yacht Club, the San Francisco Yacht Club, as brilliant as they were to start here, it had actually been going on for 100 and something years already. The first yacht club is generally considered to be the Royal Cork Club in Ireland. And you can see it was kind of there was a William IV who was a sailor king, and so it was really, you had to be royalty to be in it, but it was an organized club with rules and structure to it. And so that didn't catch on into the US for about 120 years later when the Narragansett Boat Club in Rhode Island formed in 1838. So I don't know how they figured that out, but somebody said, hey, we got to do just the same thing they're doing, and let's start an organization here focused on yachting. And then quickly after that, yacht clubs started forming all over the United States, mostly on the East Coast, and I've listed them all. You can take a look at them. But shortly thereafter, 38, right after the Civil War, that was when the yacht club, the San Francisco Yacht Club, came into being. Okay. Everybody with me okay? Am I talking too fast? A lot of information, I know. Most of it I made up. But it will be fine. Yes?
I have one question, and that is, you spoke about the rules of the first race being made out as they went along on the bay. So where did the rules of racing originate from?
That's a great question. I don't necessarily know the answer to that, although I could tell you that this club was formed on the New York Yacht Club. So right here, these bylaws were put together by the founders of the San Francisco Yacht Club, and they based it on somebody else's bylaws. So I think, imitation is the best form. So I think they probably did that. But don't forget, for about 15 years or maybe 18 years, everybody was making mistakes in the bay. So you make a mistake, you learn from it, you fix it, make a law, right? It's like running a country, I guess. And sometimes laws matter.
Let's hope.
Public service act. Okay, so these 51 men from the city of San Francisco, they formed a formal organization, and they really wanted to make it legitimate. I don't have anything about America's Cup. I learned a little bit about America's Cup. I learned that it was based on a boat called the America. So now I know why they call it America's Cup. But that had already happened for several years, and so you're hearing about that here in San Francisco, and these gentlemen are like, we're going to make a club better than any other club, and we're going to put boats out there, we're going to go faster, we're going to break records, we're going to do great things. And so that was sort of where that impetus came from. Originally, they made a clubhouse. This is an old map of San Francisco, and there's a Mission Bay. We've heard of Mission Rock and Mission Bay. This is now, of course, all filled in, and the Chase Center is sort of right in the middle of it. But there was a bridge called Long Wharf, and the San Francisco Yacht Club rented an old railroad house that was on the bridge, and that became their headquarters for a couple of years. And this picture here sort of shows around that same time how the racing was going on. There were a lot of boats in the bay, and they were in the right place at that time. But as you remember from 1869, the Transcontinental Railroad just got completed, and so now railroad fever was all over California, and Mission Bay, the railroad wanted to take back and put a railroad across that wharf, and they built a bridge. And some of the tracks are, you can still see that where they were. So they kicked out this group. And so for a while, I think I put on there, and they went to Montgomery Street, there was a wharf nearby, and they met in somebody's office, I don't know, somebody's building, 73, and then they got kicked out of there, and they moved to Clay Street, 74 to 76. They never really had a real home, and they never felt like a real club. And so in 1877, they put together a search committee of their prominent members, headed by a fellow named Henry Platt, who was a Commodore at the time, and he was in charge of trying to find a new location. So they looked around San Francisco. San Francisco's a little windy for them. They didn't want to go too far away on the backside, and so Henry Platt had this great idea, hey, let's check out Sausalito. And I always thought, well, I wonder why he would have picked Sausalito. And then I found out that he was one of the founders of the Sausalito Land and Ferry Company. Boom! That makes total sense. So now he has a win-win. He can find a great home for the yacht club, and he can sell some lots on the hill. And everybody wins, especially him. And so there was a lot of discussion. Sausalito makes sense. But there was two mindsets. Half the group wanted to go to Old Town. That's where there were already some docks and piers, wharves, infrastructure, sheltered area. And the other group said, no, we want to go to downtown. And that's in this area, because I guess it was easier. I'm not sure how they chose it. It's probably closer to Henry Platt's house. So that's probably why they did it. But right here, things go amiss. It's the first time that we have, and we're going to see a lot of these. There's a rift. The San Francisco Yacht Club breaks in half. And so if you'll follow me just a little bit, I'm going to leave the San Francisco Yacht Club waiting to come here, and I'm going to tell you about the group that decided we're going to go to Old Town and make that our home. So if you look at the map, here's number one, and here they go to, they're going to go to number one, but they go to number two, which is the Pacific Yacht Club. The Pacific Yacht Club emerges as a maybe the wealthier part of the San Francisco Yacht Club. These are the guys with the bigger boats, and they don't want to sail them themselves, so they have professional crews. So that's a great yachtsman that hires someone to do all the hard work. You can use my boat, you sail it, but you better win. And whereas the San Francisco Yacht Club was more like, we don't mind the bigger boats, but we want to sell them ourselves. We want to be real sailors. So they broke apart, and the group that went to Old Town. This is a picture. This is a painting, really a lithograph of what Old Town might have looked like here, and that's the Pacific Yacht Club Victorian mansion that they built right up on the hill. It's right where Côte d'Azur is, just to the left of that, and it was beautiful. It had many rooms. It had a nice bar. You can see right here it had a dining room where they had lots and lots of parties here. You can see this deck wrapped all the way around it. It was a beautiful view of the bay. They anchored their boats offshore here, lots and lots of boats. I thought what was interesting here is they have these Civil War cannons, these two Civil War cannons, that I sure wish I knew where they were. That would be amazing to find those. And I always wondered if they used them. I kind of put it out of my mind, but literally 2 weeks ago, I was at the Historical Society and I had to accession something. It was a cannonball. A cannonball came in that somebody had found under their house on West Street just recently, and they said that they had moved. That house had been built in like the 1880s, and so here was this cannonball. I wonder if there's a connection. But the funny thing about it was there was also a bridle, like a horse bridle. So is it possible they fired the cannon, at one fun social night and hit that horse? And then they built the house over the boat? I hope not.
whole thing is a cover-up.
I hope. So I mentioned the difference. One riff was the larger boats. The other difference between San Francisco Yacht Club members and the Pacific Yacht Club members, these richer guys just wanted to write one check. So they said, look, if you join, you can be a life member. Just write one check. You'll never have to pay any money again. So a bunch of guys wrote one big check. I'm not sure how much that check was. I'm guessing, $5,000, $1878. So I don't know, $80,000, whatever it was. They wrote a big check and they never wrote any. So they had a lot of money. That's why they built this beautiful house. And it stated that they had some really lavish parties. I'll kind of tell you some of the names of them in just a second. They had very, very few subscription members. Very few people would actually pay monthly. But they did have some younger guys, had these giant boats that said, yeah, I'll pay a little bit down and then I'll pay monthly. Whereas this San Francisco Yacht Club, they had no life members. They all paid an initiation fee and they all paid monthly because that formula works. Right, Commodore?
Keep it coming.
And so let me show you. Things were great in the 1880s. In fact, this club was the envy of all clubs. They had a beautiful house. They had all these rich members. Literally everything was a who's who. They were winning races. I mean, their professional crews were winning races, and things were just going great. This is a picture of Old Town. That's the club up there on South Street, and then this is their beach area. They built this beautiful boathouse. So if any of you were here in 70, 71 or earlier, this boathouse was still there. It was there from 1895 until 1971 when they built the Côte de Jour. I'm sorry. They built the Côte. I think it was here until 1958, and then they built the Côte de Jour, and they left that here. And then they ended up moving this north of town, and it stayed around. People lived in it, squatted in it until it literally sank in the bay in 1977. They had all this money and things were great, but then all of a sudden they didn't have any money because everybody paid, they spent it all, and there's nobody wanting to pay any more dues. So they kind of had to reorganize in 1893. They got some new members, they got a lot more subscription members, but still kind of the heyday was over for them. And they started to have some really challenging financial troubles. In fact, by 1899, they owed $20,000 in debt, and there was nobody left to pay for it. And so this club was just about gone. I found this interesting clip in a San Francisco paper from 1898, and I'll just read it to you because I think it says, the Pacific Yacht Club has suffered from a superfluity of officers and a deficiency of yachts. We got a lot of leaders and not enough boats. But the failure of the Pacifics proved that yachting is not a rich man's sport in San Francisco Bay. Owners of handsome, expensive yachts manifest less club spirit than the owners of moderate-sized or small craft. I thought that was pretty insightful. And in 1899, the club completely closed. They had to sell this beautiful property, and of course, one of their members, who was well-to-do, Adolph Spreckles from the Spreckles family, John and Adolph Spreckles, purchased the house, and one of them lived there until the 20s, and then that house got sold and sold and sold until back in 1958 when it was demolished to build the apartments there. But so when the club closed, some of the more serious members left and went to right down the street to the San Francisco Yacht Club, and they gladly took them back. But some of them also left to another club, and this is the other riff. The Corinthian Yacht Club. So, kind of jumping back just a little bit, when the San Francisco Yacht Club finally decided to come to Sausalito. They split into halves here, and the folks, they all came and they decided we're going to be on one or we're going to be on the other. But then right around 1886, so about 8 years after the San Francisco and the Pacific Yacht Club moved to Sausalito, there was a group led by Commodore Joe Tracy, who said, you know what, I feel like my small boat is not respected the same as your larger boats. We just read that quote. And so he had a following, I mentioned 51 men, who said, yeah, we want to be more serious, but we don't want to sail larger boats. So they broke away, and in the spirit of amateur yachting, they formed the Corinthian Yacht Club, which is defined as sort of an amateur sport. So it's a great name, and they set their bylaws to say you can't join if you have a boat that's over 45 feet. So everybody's got rules happening, and they said, we're going to move away. Again, they didn't want to go to San Francisco. It was a little bit windy there, and so they found this protected harbor over in Tiburon. And they moved over there in 1886. They built a little clubhouse. You can see a rendering, a picture of what it looked like after a while. That's in 1900 or so. And then I believe that burned down, and then they rebuilt this one in 1912 for $25,000, which ended up being the same sort of foundation structure as it is today. And so they had a very successful. They broke away, and they've had a very successful run every day since then. As I was doing a little bit of research on the Corinthian, there wasn't a ton because it's fairly new. If you think about it, they had one move and everybody's happy, so not much drama there. But one of the things I found was when they moved over there, there was this bridge, there was this road over in Tiburon, and they had this drawbridge. Has anybody heard this story? So this drawbridge would be closed most of the winter, and the arks and sailboats would be parked inside the cove. And then sometime around springtime, somebody would say, all right, today's the day, and they would raise the drawbridge. And here's a picture of it right here. Raising the bridge and opening the pleasure boat sailing season. So this is called opening day.
That's very close.
Came from, likely, the Corinthian Yacht Club kind of gets credit for it, and that is opening of the bridge, and they come out and enjoy it right here. So I thought that was a great piece of little history.
So did they have a clubhouse?
In Sausalito?
Yeah, did they have a clubhouse too?
The Corinthian Yacht Club?
Yeah.
No, they left the one that was here, which we're going to talk about right now, and they went and built their own in 1886. So we now go back just a little bit further. I mentioned to you, just indulge me while we talk about two of the rifts that occurred. So let's go back to talk about the OG, the old yacht club that is. Bear with me that they're still in San Francisco. The Pacific Yacht Club's going to go over there, and someday the Corinthian's going to go over there. But before they do that, they decide to come to downtown Sausalito. So they build this clubhouse right here. The same year they moved, so it's right here on the water. It's on Water Street, as you remember. In fact, you can see the three sisters, which only two of them exist today. Lucerna, Lucinda, there's like three. Anyway, this one's gone, but this is where they were, and they had this great, they could anchor right here. They have lots of events. I think that was Platt's house, and all the guys that had the money lived right there. And they enjoyed that clubhouse until 1897, when, like most of San Francisco and other places, there was a fire, and it completely destroyed this great clubhouse. And sadly, all the records, all the founding documents, all the records, their trophies, everything was destroyed by the fire. So that was unfortunate, but because they were a subscription club and not a lifetime member club, they had more money coming in. And so they were able to quickly rebuild this beautiful club over here, which is in the same spot. Doesn't that look pretty much like the Trident? That's the same location as the Trident. So 1898, the Trident claims is the year that they were sort of founded. And this much bigger club enticed more people to join, and they really had a very, very successful yachting season for years to come. This photograph, I think, is also interesting because you can see the boat house there, which is the Pacific Yacht Club, or the Spreckles Boat House, off in the distance. This house is still there on South Street. If you drive by it, it's a yellow house. This was taken about 1898, 1899. And this is Randolph Hearst's house, called Sea Point. So he came over in the late 1880s, built that beautiful house up on Sea Point, and lived there sort of off and on for about 20 years. And but was not really accepted into the society because he had this mistress that he met at Harvard named Tessie. And he would sneak her over here and keep her in the house, and she was, his mom was not very happy about that.
My wife and I live in Seaport, in that house.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
Sea Point.
And I have a whole history from the Historical Society that we're grateful for, but I'm not gonna get into it right now.
No, but I would love to, is there any foundation still? I think I heard there was some.
All I can say is, it was known as the Abbey, and my wife, Millicent, first wife's name was Millicent, and it was known as the Abbey. So I call my wife Sister Millicent.
She must appreciate that.
When we remodeled it in 1718, 6-7 years ago, this historical society was so grateful to give us a lot of the history through our real estate broker, and we're just so happy for what you've done, so thank you.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I'm envious because I love I look at that house every time I can find a picture of it, because it must have had an incredible view, and that was right off of
It's on
Josephine.
North Stair.
Yeah, the North Stairs. Well, he had that house, and then I think he rented it out. You probably know the history, but then he wanted to build a much bigger house, maybe a castle. And so you can still see the arches of the foundation behind Bridgeway, if you see them back there. But that was his idea to build Hearst Castle, was to build it here. He had Julia Morgan design it. But the residents here said, no way, we don't need a castle here. We got a yacht club of rich people. We don't need a castle. So he had to discontinue building it, and then he eventually built it in San Simeon. So. Another interesting thing, I like this picture here. This is about 1898. These guys are skinny dipping right off the club. It was just a men's club, so they could do whatever they want. And somebody caught this picture of these guys jumping in, having a good time. The next year, they accepted women into the club, right? So that quickly ended. But they were the first yacht club that I understand that accept women. So that's a great move in that favor. Moving along. I saved this because I thought I took a picture of these, so it's not very good. But this is our social calendar at the San Francisco Yacht Club. It's packed from early April opening day, and through October. They had something going just about every day. I don't know how they did it, but they were quite busy and quite social. And this list over here is a list of their members in 1900, but it kind of reads like a who's who. The highlighted ones are the guys who are the partners with the Sausalito Land and Ferry Company, so they obviously were interested in joining. And then there were a number of women members that are on this list, and then there was a couple of really high-end members, or at least prominent members. Matthew Turner, his name is on there. He was a member of the Yacht Club, and he built boats for the club. So I thought that was amazing. The president of Bank of America, just a lot of prominent people were part of this club. But after a number of years, Sausalito continued to grow fast, right? They started ferry service, increased ferry service. They had an auto ferry that started, and that came by. And so the wake, the noise, the dust on the streets here were just too much for the members of the yacht club. So in 1927, they decided it's time to move on, and they started a search committee, and they looked again San Francisco. They decided against that, and they decided instead to go to Belvedere. And so you can see there's a couple pictures here. 1926 search committee found a cove over in Belvedere, and they built a clubhouse there. They dredged the cove, built a clubhouse, and it's been expanded since then. And that club is now 156 years old, and it has done. It's something that we can all be proud of, that the history of it. Even though we're not members necessarily, we can be happy that they're part of something such a great legacy here. At the same time, one more riff occurred. So you know, when the San Francisco Yacht Club was deciding where to go, there was a group of people who also did not want to go to Belvedere. And perhaps they were living in San Francisco, and they were like, that's too much commuting. And so they broke off. About 49 members broke off, and they decided they couldn't use San Francisco Yacht Club. Originally they were going to try to have two, one on San Francisco, one on Belvedere. They couldn't do that, so they picked St. Francis Yacht Club, similar in name. And they wanted to find some land. They decided the old 1915 Expo that was in San Francisco had built up the marina area, and one of their members was named Hiram Johnson, and his dad was Hiram Johnson, the governor. And so he was able to convince his dad to deed that strip of land in the marina and only use it for nautical purposes, for marine activity, and then he was able to lease it to the St. Francis Yacht Club. So all under the table, but he got it done, and they built that first clubhouse, and then they, of course, since then expanded it and now have a beautiful place that continues to serve the yachting community. So great for them. With Sausalito, when they left Sausalito, there was no more yacht club in Sausalito. So San Francisco, Belvedere, Corinthian over at Tiburon, St. Francis, and San Francisco, we had no yacht club here. After 50 years, no yacht club. Until 1942. And I think most of you know this story, so I'll just go through it really quickly, and if I get it wrong, I apologize. But this is a picture of some of the kids in the yacht club. Two of them are the founders. I think this fella here and this guy. And there were 7 gentlemen, young men, I think mostly 14, 15, 16. And of course, 1942, there's a war going on. So all the older men went to serve. They served in Europe, they served in the Pacific. They were probably members of these yacht clubs. And probably these kids were junior members of some of those yacht clubs. But when they left, they said, hey, will you take care of our yachts for us? Just keep an eye on them and help us out. And they thought, yes, of course we'll do that. And then they thought, we don't have any good junior sailing programs at these other yacht clubs. We should form our own yacht club. And so they picked, New Year's Eve, probably, we're having a good time, and decided let's start a yacht club. And the first rule was you can't have anyone over the oldest member. I thought that was brilliant, right? The oldest member was 17 years old. So nobody could join the yacht club if you're older than the oldest member. And they did that until 1953, apparently. So as they got older, they accepted, okay, you're 22, you can come and join, because I'm 22. So it must have been a bit of a slow growth, but they were pretty excited about it, because they had these boats, they had this plan. That originally they were, I think, going to call themselves the Richardson Bay Yacht Club. Has anybody heard that? And then they found out that the San Francisco Yacht Club owed that name, and so they settled on brilliant Sausalito Yacht Club. Let's see. Originally they met in their partners' houses. That was kind of boring and didn't work out, so they decided this old barge called not a barge, but this old floating boat called the Santa Barbara, and it had one room, and it was like the officer's salon. So when it was sitting out in the mud, and so when tide was low, they could walk out, they could have their meetings, and then they had to leave before tide came back in. So that was okay for a while, but it couldn't have any social events over there. So they said, all right, we need to find another place. They found an old army building that was part of the old railroad termination here. that the Army had. That smell, the guys didn't mind, but they couldn't, the women wouldn't want to come over, so that didn't last long. They went to the old Yacht Club, which was kind of empty, and on the second floor, they met there for a couple of years, a year-ish, but that didn't work out, and so they eventually decided to build a club. I'm kind of hustling through this a little bit. They were very involved. They did lots of racing. They did cruises. They did dances. They did fundraisers. So they got things going pretty well. But it probably wasn't until they had enough members who were of enough age to earn money that they could afford to build this house. And one of their club members was an architect, I believe, and he helped design this club here. Unique look. This is a beautiful club that has such a unique look, and that was what got going, and the club officially opened up in 1960. So you all know the history from 1960. You're a beautiful club. You have a lot to be proud of, and the history continues as we go forward today. The understanding is that there were members here in the Sausalito club, but you had to be, by 1948, I think the oldest member was 24 or something. So, but there was a group of people that wanted cruising versus sailing. And so it appears that there was a group that may have broke off from here or that had just developed on their own. It may have been led by Lewis from Madden Lewis, Dick Lewis, because he's the first Commodore of the Cruising Club. And it's possible that he got that going. But in 1948, at the end of the year, the Cruising Club was formed to do more boating on, and it was a little bit less formal too. And in fact, when you look at their clubhouse, because they also met in a lot of weird places, at homes and places in the Portuguese Hall, and then finally in 1960, the Commodore at the time, I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
Yeah.
The Commodore at the time, you were watching TV, and he sees this great show called Surfside 6. Anybody ever heard of Surfside 6? It's a crime show based in Miami, and their clubhouse. This is right off their website. That was their clubhouse, and it was a floating barge. And the Commodore said, "We need a floating barge. That's a brilliant idea. Let's have a clubhouse on the water." I mean, how similar is that, right? So he, in 1960, now you all were building this clubhouse, and I'm sure he's like, we need a clubhouse now. So he finds a barge, which is rumored to be an old World War II ammunition barge. He finds it up in the Petaluma River, buys it for $500, tows it down here, and then Madden and Lewis add a second floor. They add a gallery, they add a dance floor. They make a boat out of it, and it is launched as their clubhouse in late 1960. And it continues to be a successful clubhouse for them off Dumpy Park there until around 1980, when it's just rotting, the wood's rotting, and the tide is, if you've ever been on it moves, which is fun. They contract with a company, Aqua Mason. I think they're out of business now, but they contract with them to build a cement enclosure. You take it out, they sink it, they float it, they bring it, and now it sits there sort of permanently. And so the club continues on today with its more casual membership. Finally, the Pacific Yacht Club, the Presidio Yacht Club. Everybody knows, has probably been by the Presidio Yacht Club. Its history goes back to the days when it was owned by Richardson, right, as part of his land grant. The Army takes it over to try to defend the coast, and they put gun emplacements up, and then during World War II it becomes a submarine mining place to keep submarines out of the bay. And then post-World War II, some of the structures, the marina sits empty, so the Presidio, the Army allows the soldiers to park their boats there. And then there's an old building that they have a little bit of socializing in there. And around the bay, I guess the Army had a number of those. At Fort Mason, Yerba Buena, I think Alameda had them. And those all closed down in the 50s. And this was the only one left. And they formalized it in 1959 to become the Presidio Yacht Club. It's managed by Travis Air Force Base, so the Travis Marina, and it has a military salute to it, but it's also open to the public. And you can see that, there we go. It's here now, beautiful. It's got a great view of the bay, and they continue on. And that is all the yacht clubs. I'm sorry I sort of raced at the end there because I didn't want to keep this too late, and I would love to open it for questions. But it's been 155 years since the first yacht club was founded, and I think 6 of them are still around, and they're all flourishing, including this great historic club. And that's something that we can all be proud of. So from me and the Historical Society to you, thank you for what you do for yachting, and thank you for allowing us to be here to meet with you. 7:20, but I'm happy to take as many questions as there are, noting that I'm not an expert. I just know what I know. Yeah, go ahead, Commodore.
Yeah, Commodore. New York Yacht Club and the beginning of the American stuff. You started recently. The beginning of American stuff was Lipton challenged America in England. We won the American Cup. They brought it back to the New York Yacht Club. When was the New York Yacht Club founded?
I don't have the answer. Well, it might be on that slide that I put on there, but yeah, and I really wanted to add something. It just got too long, but I think that America's Cup really got yachting started because it was so important. And then of course, the United States or whoever the yacht club was at the time has won it for 100 years.
The New York Yacht Club challenged Lipton in England.
Okay.
And they won it, and it was called the American Cup.
Yeah. The name of the boat.
The name of the boat.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have that? Good. Nick.
Rick, thank you so much. This is amazing, interesting, fascinating. Thank you. Really weird, dumb question, but do you know any history on the Burgees? Since the Burgees are...
Good question.
I don't.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. I just think they're...
That would be a great history research project.
Love it. Yeah.
That'd be
And
fabulous.
I'm going to now want to find that out. But those are the Burgees that were. Well, you saw the one from the San Francisco Yacht Club. It said 1869. So they must have had it in the East Coast. Somebody came up with the idea. They brought it here. They quickly changed to that more conventional look. And then these are the Burgees of the 7 yacht clubs. I do want to make a quick comment about the second one, the Pacific Yacht Club. I could not find that for months. It's not on the internet. There's nothing on it. And I happened to be in the Historical Society, and I was digging through some archives, and I found hidden away this small book from the Pacific Yacht Club in 1889, and there was a painting of that on there. And so I took a picture of it, kind of cleaned it up a bit. But as far as I know, I bet somebody hasn't seen that Burgee in 100 years. You might be the first people to see that Burgee in 100 years.
Follow-up Burgee question. What is the one, 1948? Is that Cruising Club?
Yeah, that's our cruising club.
Okay, so is that why it's kind of waiting?
I love that.
Yeah. It's the tide is rocking the boat, and that Burgee never
Tide
sits
is
still.
rocking the club.
Rocking the club.
Barges.
Yeah.
Looking to coming up.
Andy.
If Colonel Richardson's family lived in Marin City?
What?
At any time?
Yeah, I was wondering. I heard a story, they built a house in the hills up in Marin City.
Anybody else might know that? I have not heard that. He died in 1856 or something, too young, and then his family lived in that adobe house over on Caledonia for a long time. Then I don't know what happened. Good question. Great questions, everybody. Give me some homework. Okay,
Rick, I have a
yeah.
question. So, when Russell introduced you and said you were in the East Bay, were you a history professor or anthropologist at UC Berkeley? And how did you get into such a wonderful...
No, but I bet you were a rugby player at Cal.
No, I was football, but go ahead.
Football. You and I know Mark Beesman.
Oh my God.
Then we can talk about that after some more drinks.
In the bar.
No, I was a chemistry major at Cal. I went to Cal in 1980. I was a science major. I was in chemistry for 5 years, and then wanted to start a business and decided to start a tour operation. So I ran a tour business for 40 years. And if you ever had any kids travel, it was youth travel. Washington, D.C., Disney, parades, sports, about a couple 100,000 kids a year, something like that.
Where was your passion on history?
I think it comes from my dad and my family. When we moved back here in 2000, I started reading up on Sausalito history because I love history. I love to read. But the history of Sausalito, just so, as a closing note, we have 7,500 people here. 20% of Sausalito is underwater, right? And the rest of Sausalito is pretty darn small. And we have more rich history than most towns older than us do for 250 years. And that's why the Historical Society is relevant here. This is just one topic, and we have a whole series of things, of talks coming up, but there's a long list of great topics here. And there's a new, Jack Tracy has a book called Moments in Time. We're redoing it for our 50th anniversary, the Historical Society's 50th anniversary. So take a look at that book. It's amazing. You'll feel very proud of your city.
One question. What effect did the Golden Gate Bridge, its completion in the mid-30s, have on the yacht clubs area?
I don't know that they impacted anybody on this side, because you remember the last yacht club left here in 1927. The bridge was completed in 1937, and then this club was formed in 1942. So I don't think it probably had anything. Probably made it easier to get here than having to sail here.
Yeah, I thought the San Francisco Yacht Club established after the Golden Gate Bridge.
But not according to.
I know.
Yeah.
You corrected me.
Yeah. The 10 years later, they left, and then 10 years later, the bridge was completed. Yeah. All right, I'm going to be here for a little while, so if you want to say anything, but otherwise, thank you for having us. And, thanks for being a part of this great team.
Thank you so much, Rick. That was really interesting, and we're going to have you back and answer all the rest of those questions. So in May, we're having RBOC and PICYA here. Lots of things happening on the state level and our local level with gas stocks, with the tunnel, with the boats that have been abandoned up in the Delta. Very interesting things to talk about. And that's going to be a different date. So we're still organizing the time, but it's going to be the first or second Wednesday in May. In June, we have a speaker that has done a video on Humphrey the Whale, and he has got quite a show to show us. That'll be on the third Wednesday in July. We have Modern Sailing, Sailing with Children, from the owner of Modern Sailing. And in August, we have the Marine Mammal Center. So keep an eye out for all of these upcoming events. Thank you guys very much.
Thanks, Mark.